Sometimes our best effort comes up short. Stick around and we'll get right to it.
Real quick, before we get going, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below.
Hey, welcome back, guys. Jason, KM4ACK. Today, I'm joined by Mike, KG4VDK. We're going to talk about some of the things that went right and some of the things that went wrong in a recent event that we supported. You guys are always asking, how can we use these digital modes in more of a practical environment? And this is one of those use cases where we utilize digital to speed up and streamline data entry and moving that data over RF. Mike, thanks, man, for joining me today.
Yeah.
So this was the Christmas parade that we just got finished up with a couple of days ago. Now, what that involves for us as a club, and it's not just me and you, there's probably, about 20 people that help us out with this or put this thing together. Plus, we've got city employees, plus we got the police. There's a lot of different moving parts to this. But kind of what we are responsible for is getting all of the people, the floats and things registered for the parade. And then we have to move that data to Net Control, who compiles all of that. And then in turn, they take that data and move it to the TV station, who's going to announce each of the people in the parade as they come by. And help me out if I miss something. Now, in years past, we have always done that using voice. So if you come up and checked in, I had to basically write down your information. So your name, your contact information, your organization name, how many floats you had, if you had extra vehicles, if you had walkers.
Yep.
And then that was all relayed over voice back to Net Control.
Including all the spelling corrections and all that kind of stuff.
So this year, we kind of tried to streamline this as best we could. Tell me a little bit about what you came up with from the registration side, because you did all the registration, and then I was on the receiving end next to Net Control.
So we're in a discrete parking lot that's kind of off-site for where the parade is. That's where everybody that has an entry in the parade comes there first, gathers up, finishes decorating their float. Once they're all decorated up and ready to go, they roll through a check-in line, and that's where the city employees and some of the club members are sitting to figure out, all right, which organization are you? We've got you checked in. Here's your placard number that goes on your vehicle. So you're the first one through at 9 a.m. at check-in. You get placard number 1. You're the first entry in the parade. And so we were putting all of that into a web-based form to be able to enter that into a spreadsheet, a CSV spreadsheet. So as people came through, we had a hard copy of the predefined entries that the city had given us, so we could say organization ABC, find them on the list. We know their contact person, their phone number, the actual spelling that they entered on whatever registration form they put their entry in on. And then we're looking at the float or the vehicle or the group walking right there and can say there's one vehicle, one float, 15 walkers. Put that all in the form, submit that, it goes to the server, and then every 15, 20, or sometimes longer than that as it went, we would send a batch of here's what the current entry list looks like. We'd send that off to Net Control over FLDIGI or FLAMP using FLDIGI to get the most updated version of that sheet onto Net Control so that they could pass that along to the news crew at the end once we had the final, or if they wanted to start sending it as it went, so the news crew kind of had a running tally of what was coming in.
Right, okay. So you guys, the city had everybody to register basically for the parade.
Yes.
But that's not any sort of ordered list.
Correct. That's just an alphabetical list of these are the people that have paid their entry fee, and these are the ones we're expecting to show up. So their list actually had 120 some odd entries on it. I guess some of them had, flu issues may have popped up or just things popped up. So we end up with I think 104 total entries that actually were a part of the parade.
So your job then is to capture this data, assign them a placard number. So if you're the first one up for the day, you get placard number 1. Next one up gets placard 2, blah, blah, blah. And then that information eventually winds up with the TV crew so that they can identify each group as they come down the road, right? Okay, so now once we got all of this data captured, me and you had done some testing ahead of time, which was absolutely critical. And we decided that 2 meters was gonna work. And with a bit more testing, we determined that BPSK 500 was the best modem to be used in this application.
Yeah, to give us the reasonable throughput speed and reliability so that we didn't have to worry about missing blocks and that kind of thing. And some of the other modes, you'd not be able to lock your transmit where you want it to and start following it around the band. So we ended up with BPSK 500 and we sacrificed a little bit of speed for reliability, which makes good sense to me.
So for the value of the audience, we did try using BPSK 1000 and we had 0 issues as far as throughput. But Mike and I wanted to not only send data over this simplex frequency, we also wanted to chit chat over this in between. So, hey, are you ready for me to send? Or yes, I got 100% copy. The problem is, for whatever reason, we probably need to dig into this a little bit more. But BPSK 1000 ended up, every time we would talk, the markers inside of FLDIGI would jump around on the band, and then we would have to recenter it at 1500 before we would start a transmit.
Or risk losing the whole transmit.
Yeah, or risk losing all of it. And what we figured out is if you go to BPSK 500, for whatever reason, we could talk on it all day long and it didn't jump around. So we ended up, Mike, having how many different transmits? 4 or 5 different times?
I think we did a test at the beginning, and I think there were 3 batches before the final send. So a test, 3 batches, and then a final. So 5.
Okay, 5 total, 4 if we don't count the test.
Yeah.
And I think on our last one, which had 104 entries, it took, what, a minute and 40 seconds?
Minute and a half, minute and 40 seconds, something like that.
Yeah, so much faster than trying to read all of that over the air.
Yeah.
And there was absolutely 0 errors once it made it to my location, and then I just took it, dropped it on a thumb drive, and walked it over to net control. I had my RV there. We were literally parked side by side, so that was super easy to do.
And what did we have? 4 missed blocks in one transmission?
Yeah,
that was it.
It was
so
the
entire thing. We only had 4 missed blocks.
Yeah, the very last transmit, we had 4 missed blocks, and the cool thing, in case these guys watching don't know, so the way FLDIGI handles this when you're using FL AMP, and guys, I've got some videos on this. I'll link to those down in the description. But the way FL AMP works is it takes a file and breaks it up into chunks of equal size. And I believe that last one had 64 blocks, 54 or 64, whichever it was. We missed 4 of them. One of the cool features, though, about FL AMP is when I saw that I had missed those 4 blocks, there's a button inside of FL AMP that I can literally just click that says report. That lets Mike know, it transmits back out over RF and lets Mike know that I am missing those 4 specific blocks. When he sees that response on his side, he simply clicks a button that says fetch. It figures out which 4 blocks I was missing, and then he just hits transmit and it retransmits only those 4 specific blocks. So we don't have to go back through the whole thing. I think the second time it was like 10 or 12 seconds to get those last 4 blocks. And guys, I apologize if you haven't seen already, there is an airport right behind us. We're doing the best we can with the planes taking off and landing today. So looking back at it now, how did it work compared to last year? Did you find it easier on your end?
Well, I found it way easier. I had 2 people helping me at my station, so I wasn't actually doing most of the data entry. So from that standpoint, there was some, obviously we're manually inputting data that we can find a way to streamline that hopefully in the future. But from the what was our goal and how did it go? Our goal was to reduce voice traffic over the repeater, and I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that we reduced voice traffic over the repeater, at least with regards to check-ins and talking to lineup and net control about check-ins. I don't think I'm exaggerating to say we reduced it by 90%.
Yeah, at least 85 to 90%.
To the point that I think you even lightheartedly said during the check-in time frame, we here at Parade Operations were bored.
Yeah, until the parade kicked off, it was a little quiet.
Which
at our side.
That was the goal, because what that does is it frees up that repeater for the folks that aren't doing check-ins to coordinate getting to their stations and making sure that everything that they have is already in place. If they need to talk with Parade Operations, they're not having to find dead air in between, just constant stuff coming from registration. We've left that repeater open so that it can actually be used for coordination between other parts of the group that we're with.
Now, jumping back for a second, you actually built out this data capture, data input system, right?
Yes.
And you've got that as part of ARC-OS.
Yes.
So someone else could take what you've got, drop it onto a USB drive and run that as a live image on a laptop without even having to install anything.
Correct.
So guys, if you're interested in that, I'll also leave a link to ARC-OS down in the description. Don't ask me how he did the wizardry on his side. You're going to have to email Mike and figure that out, especially if you want to change up anything.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hopefully set up in a way that can be modified by any other group that needs to use it, but it is kind of tailored to what we did and will continue to be tailored to that. So it can be modified, but you're going to need to know a little bit of HTML and PHP.
But it wouldn't be, if somebody did know some PHP and some HTML, it wouldn't be hard to modify this to say check-in people that were coming into a shelter.
Yeah, that was part of why it was built the way it was built. Yes, it can be used for the parade, but to be kind of flexible enough to be used for any other instance where especially a ham radio or emergency communications group needs to do intake of data that needs to be put into any sort of organized spreadsheet form, that we could just keep track of what came in.
I mean, really, it's asset tracking.
Yeah.
That's all it is. If whatever that asset happens to be, if that's food and water locations, if that's people checking into a shelter, or if that's participants in the parade.
Yeah.
So guys, definitely check that out if that's something that you might be interested in. Now, another cool thing that you came up with was the FM transmitter. Oh, I do want to say this before we get into this. Guys, if this is something you are interested in after we tell you a little bit about how we used this, definitely do your research and make sure you stay within the guidelines that the FCC lays out to make sure that you're legal if you want to try this. That was a lot of research that went into it to make sure we stayed within those guidelines. Now tell us a little bit about the FM transmitter, because this was one of the things that excited the city the most.
Yeah, so when everybody shows up at this parking lot to get ready to do their check-ins, they've all been sent like a PDF and an email of here's the rules and regulations for the parade and here's how to handle coming through check-in. And a lot of what I did, either on the web side and this FM broadcast side, was designed to reduce the amount of repetitive answering of questions or repetitive entry of things. And so the FM broadcast was essentially just taking the information that was already sent out to people that they honestly probably didn't read and putting it out over an FM broadcast so that when you showed up in the parking lot, the city had signage up that said there's parade information available on 87.9 FM. And we just had a looping broadcast of that information with some Christmas music laid under it that the city had a license to be playing. So that we wouldn't have to constantly answer, hey, what time does check-ins close? It's on 87.9 FM. We don't need to constantly be answering that question, taking away the time from the city to be actually entering in the entries for the parade. So that was just a way to alleviate some of that while hopefully getting that information into the ears of people that didn't put it in through their eyeballs.
Yeah. So, like I said, that was something that the city, I think when we had that pre-planning meeting with the city itself,
that was weirdly the thing they were most excited about.
Of all the other things that we do, their eyes lit up when you told them that you had been working on this. Now, how did you get that data from their PDF layout over to the FM transmitter? Kind of walk me through that process a little bit.
I just kind of consolidated the parts of that information that I thought were most applicable, the timings of things and whether or not you're allowed to have somebody dressed as Santa. No, you're not. There's only one official Santa in the parade. So stuff like that, I just typed it up in a text file, and then I used Amazon's Polly service. It's a text-to-voice service that'll use like an AI-generated voice so it sounds like a human reading it. Export that as a WAV file, drop it on top of, I used the Linus and Lucy theme. And so the music would start, and then eventually the music volume drops down, that voice goes in on top of it, and then once the voice is done reading, the music comes back up. And I used a Raspberry Pi, and if you're familiar with APLay, to play a WAV file, it's just a WAV file that's the music with the voice on it, played on a loop over an FM transmitter, just plugged into the headphone jack on the Raspberry Pi as the input to the transmitter.
So audio out from the Pi fed into that FM transmitter.
Yeah, and we were expecting some rain that day, so it got waterproofed by sitting in a 5-gallon bucket on top of the trailer there at registration.
Hey, whatever works, right?
Keep it simple.
So that was, that was all the data entry side. Now, I want to tell a little bit about my side of this. From a perspective of receiving the FLDIGI, that was flawless. One of the other things, though, that I wanted to do this year, we had kind of sort of implemented APRS last year. And basically, it was the very first time APRS had been used in any sort of a capacity was last year. So this year, I wanted to kind of build on that and see if I couldn't do more with APRS. So I set up a APRS station with a map in the RV, and I could, the antenna for that system was up about 30 feet, and everybody is spread out over, about a mile, maybe a mile and a half?
Yeah.
So I could pretty much keep track of every single person just with that station. But the other thing I wanted to do, and I had done this last year, was I put up that APRS digipeater. And then to go along with the digipeater, I created a couple of trackers. And the original plan was to track the Grand Marshal, so we knew where the beginning of the parade was. And then I wanted to track the Santa float, which is always the last thing that goes down the street. Well, things don't always go as planned. And this is where I say our best efforts can come up short, and you just cannot plan for every single thing that could possibly happen.
Doesn't matter how many things you test, you'll always find those 2 or 3 that you just didn't get to.
So, although I had tested the digipeater, we put the digipeater up. Now, let me say that the location of the digipeater is about 3/4 of a mile from where parade operations is, and it's on top of a secured 4-story parking deck. We have access to it at least up into a point. At some point from operations, I am actually closed off behind the barricade, and we can't easily get in and out of that area. So it's something that once we get the portable repeater and the portable digipeater up on the parking deck, which is done first thing that morning, we basically lose access to that until after the parade is over. What I ran into this year was a bad piece of coax, or a bad coax connection on that APRS digipeater. I couldn't figure out why, but the digipeater was absolutely deaf. I was hearing nothing out of this digipeater during the parade, which also, by the way, took out both of my trackers pretty much from working at all. I don't know what happened to this. I inspected this piece of equipment beforehand, obviously not well enough.
Well, you had mentioned that you had tested it, at home with an HT sending out beacons right to your digipeater right here. Doesn't matter if the coax works, it's right there in the same room. Of course it's going to hear it. So you think you've tested something, but you didn't test it with real world variables in play.
Yep.
And you just end up in this position. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was hearing a radio 6 inches away from it with no problem. Of course, you could take the antenna off both radios and that would still work. But yeah, when I got back home, I didn't turn the thing off. I wanted to leave it exactly in the state it was in. So as soon as I got in that afternoon, I started opening things up, and I look at the radio first. The radio is working. Everything's powered up. The Raspberry Pi is powered up. And I'm like scratching my head a little bit, and I thought, well, I'm gonna have to go ahead and start disassembling this box. And the first thing I did was reach up to unconnect the coax from the inside. And I'm looking at a piece of raw coax with a connector still over here, and I went,
I think I found the problem.
I bet that's a clue. So even if we could have gotten back up to that, to the parking deck, to that, I doubt
have a spare for that.
Yeah, I doubt I could have found a 6-inch piece of coax with 2 BNC connectors that would have fit back into that box. So sometimes you've got what you got.
Yeah.
So what would you change? Obviously, I'm going to check the digipeater next year a little closer before I put it up there. What would you change from your side?
Knowing what we know now, the city was able to provide that. Here's who has registered spreadsheet to us about, 2 days before the parade, which just didn't give me enough time to do this. There was also some confusion as to whether or not the city was going to pre-issue placard numbers. So the way we were inputting data, I was told that we were going to have pre-issued placard numbers, meaning that organization ABC shows up at 9 a.m. They're the first one in the parade, but they have a pre-issued placard number of 23. So I was actually using timestamps to say 9 a.m. check-in, you're the top of the list. Doesn't matter if you're number 23, you need to be at the top of the list. Knowing now that they're going to just sequentially issue placard numbers, I would probably take the data that they give us ahead of time and create all of the entries as unplacarded, so that whoever's entering that data in has to do is find that entry in a drop-down list and put their placard number in there instead of having to manually type in an organization name and a contact name and a phone number. I feel like I put a lot of manual input on the folks that were on my team there that I would like to get rid of. Just didn't have the information needed to know that that was going to be a working solution beforehand.
Well, this is only our second year to be involved in the parade.
Yeah.
So it's still a bit of a learning curve for us, and we will continue to improve every single year, hopefully.
Yeah, but we at least proved the point that our goal, like we said, going into this, our main goal was to try to reduce that voice traffic and then add the APRS tracking. The reduction of voice traffic worked well doing digital stuff. The APRS stuff worked right up until it didn't. So there's just some more iteration to do. Unfortunately, we don't get another parade for another year, so we don't get a chance to redeem ourselves as quickly as we would like to. Well, but we do have a year to test.
Yeah, and the good thing is that APRS tracking, I mean, that had no overall impact, or no impact on the overall success of what our club was able to do. Because I want to back up and kind of for the viewers, explain a little bit more about this. So the parade is not all in a single file line and you just send them down the road.
Yeah.
You're lining up the floats, but in addition to that, you've got emergency vehicles that aren't in your line. We've got bands that aren't in your line. These are all staged at various blocks.
At places where we just happen to have parking lots that have enough room to stage whatever this group is.
Right. So one of the things that our club does, though, is as the parade, as the float participants start, we are we're tasked with making sure everybody is in line the way they're supposed to be. So, for instance, the emergency vehicles and the grand marshals are the first thing in the parade, but they're not over where the floats are. So we have to get them onto the street, then we start putting floats onto the street.
And then inject bands at the right place. But you can't inject the band right after a group that's playing loud music. So you've got to, we want to do bands every 10 floats, but maybe the 10th float has big old loud speakers on their float. So you got to play that game. So
there's a lot of juggling that the club does, trying to coordinate that and make sure that that makes sense and doesn't, we don't have two floats basically competing with one another music-wise or something like that. So there's more to it than just moving data over RF. There's a lot of just manpower that goes into it. Yeah, a lot of logistics that goes into it.
yeah.
Did we miss anything, or is there anything else you think we should cover?
No, I think we learned a lot of lessons, and we have a lot of things that we can do better. Not that we did badly this time, but just things that we can make more robust and things that we can streamline. Because one of the things that you and I had talked about before was that one of our goals was to reduce voice traffic, and my second goal is to find more time to stand around, drink coffee, and cut up. You know, how much work can we do on the front end so that we get to actually interact with the public, mingle, and be that face of amateur radio that doesn't look like we're just sitting there not having fun.
Right. Right.
So
well, I'm
that's
sure
what I
there will
wanted to
be
do.
some brainstorming that goes on over the next 11 months
Absolutely.
until we're ready to do this again.
Yeah.
All right. Man, thanks for
Absolutely.
helping me out with this video. Guys, if you found today's information helpful, be sure to leave us a thumbs up before you head off. We'll see you guys on the next one. Until then, 7-3.